The fire alarm blared. Executives scrambled. But one voice, soft, ignored, knew the building better than anyone. Janice, the janitor with golden hair and gentle hands, had once led rescue missions in burning forests. No one knew, until she saved them all. This is the story of how a simple woman shattered assumptions and became a silent legend. Would you have followed her? The fire alarm screamed through the pristine office tower on a Tuesday morning that would change everything. 27 floors of glass and steel suddenly buzzed with irritation as employees shuffled toward the lobby, their designer shoes clicking against marble floors. It was just another mandatory drill, another interruption to their important work. But in the background, almost invisible to the sea of suits and smartphones, a simple woman moved with quiet purpose. Emma wiped down the brass railing with steady hands, her golden hair tucked beneath a worn baseball cap, her fair skin catching the harsh fluorescent light. At 26, she had learned to blend into the shadows, to be useful but unseen. The janitor's uniform hung loose on her small frame, navy blue polyester that had seen better days, white sneakers that squeaked softly against the polished floors. She was everything these people expected her to be. Forgettable, insignificant, just another member of the cleaning crew. The alarm blasted again, sharp and insistent. Employees gathered in clusters, checking their phones, complaining about lost productivity. Executive assistants rolled their eyes. Marketing managers sighed dramatically. The accounting department huddled together, already planning their return to spreadsheets and conference calls. But Emma saw something they didn't: the way the crowd was forming, the bottleneck that was building near the main exits, the potential for panic if this were real. She moved quickly, her voice cutting through the chatter with surprising authority. "This way. Over here. It's safer and less crowded." Her words carried a strange confidence that made several people turn. She was pointing toward a side emergency exit, away from the main flow of traffic, away from the obvious path that everyone else was taking. A few employees paused, confused. Why was the cleaning lady giving directions Marcus Henderson, a vice president with perfectly styled hair and a watch that cost more than most people's cars, heard her voice and scowled, his lip curled with disgust? "Excuse me, we follow building protocol here, not random suggestions from the staff." The word staff dripped with contempt, like she was somehow less human because she held a mop instead of a business degree. Emma's face remained calm, but something flickered in her hazel eyes, a depth that didn't match her humble appearance. She adjusted her cap and spoke again, softer this time, but no less certain. "That path leads directly to the basement exit. It's faster and completely smoke-free if there's ever a real emergency." The precision of her words was unsettling. She wasn't guessing. She knew. Sarah Chen, a junior analyst, hesitated at the edge of the crowd. Something about the janitor's tone made her pause. There was knowledge there, experience that didn't fit with the uniform. But the others weren't listening. Jennifer Walsh from marketing laughed, a sharp sound that echoed off the marble walls. What could a cleaner possibly know about building safety? That's not exactly in her job description. More chuckles rippled through the group, the kind of laughter that cuts deep, the kind that reminds you of your place in the world. Emma's hand brushed against her uniform pocket, fingers touching something small and metallic hidden inside. For just a moment, her expression changed. A flash of something that looked almost like authority, command, the bearing of someone who had once been in charge of life and death decisions. But it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by the patient resignation of someone who had learned to swallow her pride for the sake of survival. Dr. Richard Coleman, the head of operations, stepped forward with his usual air of superiority. His British accent made everything sound more important, more final. "Ladies and gentlemen, please maintain order. Building management has designated specific evacuation routes for optimal safety. We don't deviate from protocol based on uninformed opinions." Uninformed opinions. The words hit Emma like a physical blow, but she didn't flinch. She had heard worse, much worse. Instead, She positioned herself near the side exit she had indicated, her slim frame tense with anticipation, ready to act if needed, ready to help even those who refused to see her as anything more than invisible. The crowd began moving toward the main exits. Following the yellow signs and the voice of authority, they filed past Emma without a second glance, their conversations already shifting back to meetings and deadlines and lunch plans. But Emma remained where she was, watching, waiting. Her fingers traced the outline of that hidden object in her pocket once more. A faded silver badge that read, Civil Rescue Command, Team Leader. A reminder of who she used to be before life forced her to become someone else entirely. The contrast was stark and painful. Here stood a woman who had once coordinated the evacuation of entire towns during natural disasters, now dismissed as just another member of the cleaning crew. Someone whose voice had once commanded respect from firefighters and paramedics, now ignored by office workers who thought a college degree made them experts on everything. Emma's quiet persistence spoke volumes about her character. She didn't argue or demand attention. She simply stood ready, her training and instincts intact despite the uniform that rendered her invisible to those around her. The narrative tension built like pressure in a steam valve. Every dismissive comment, every rolled eye, every assumption about her capabilities added another layer to the coming revelation. These people had no idea who they were dealing with, no understanding of the expertise that stood quietly in their midst, ready to save their lives if the moment demanded it. As the last of the employees disappeared through the main exits, Emma remained at her post, still watching, still ready, because she knew something they didn't. Sometimes the most dangerous emergencies come when you least expect them, and sometimes the person best equipped to handle them is the one you never see coming. The simulated smoke began pouring through the air vents like gray fingers, reaching into every corner of the building. What had started as a routine drill suddenly felt very real. The acrid smell filled nostrils and burned throats. Employees who had been casually strolling toward exits now moved with growing urgency. The main corridors became a nightmare of confusion. Bodies pressed against bodies as panic began to creep in at the edges of the crowd. Someone stumbled. Another person pushed. The orderly evacuation was dissolving into chaos right before their eyes. That's when Emma stepped forward. Her voice cut through the noise like a blade through silk. Clear, commanding, absolutely certain. I was a civil rescue team leader back home. Trust me. Follow this way. The crowd froze as if someone had hit a pause button on reality. A janitor, leading rescue missions. The words didn't compute. They stared at her small frame, her simple uniform, her golden hair that had somehow come loose from under her cap. This was the woman they had dismissed moments ago, the one whose advice they had laughed at. Marcus Henderson's mouth fell open. His expensive suit suddenly felt ridiculous as he tried to process what he was hearing. You're joking. You have to be joking. But Emma's delicate features had transformed completely. Gone was the meek acceptance, the quiet resignation. In its place stood something that made the air around her feel electric with authority. Her hazel eyes blazed with the kind of confidence that only comes from facing death and winning. She reached into her pocket and pulled out that silver badge. Civil Rescue Command. Team Leader. The metal caught the emergency lighting and threw it back like a challenge. 3 years coordinating disaster response in mountain country, she said, her voice steady as granite. Wildfires, flash floods, chemical spills. I've led evacuations for entire towns. Dr. Coleman adjusted his glasses, his British accent faltering for the first time anyone could remember. But how did you end up working as... Life happens. Emma cut him off. Right now, that doesn't matter. What matters is getting you all out alive. The simulated smoke was getting thicker. The main exits were completely clogged with confused, frightened people. Someone was crying. Someone else was shouting. The carefully planned drill was becoming exactly the kind of situation Emma had trained for her entire adult life. Sarah Chen, the junior analyst who had hesitated earlier, stepped forward first. Something in Emma's voice, in her bearing, convinced her that this was real, that this woman, despite her uniform, despite her humble appearance, knew exactly what she was doing. "I'll follow you," Sarah said quietly. Jennifer Walsh from marketing looked torn between her ingrained prejudice and her growing fear. The smoke was making her eyes water. The crowd was getting more agitated by the second. She looked at Emma's calm face and made her choice. "Me too." One by one, others began to move toward Emma. Not all of them. Marcus Henderson and his inner circle remained frozen by disbelief. But enough. Enough to matter. Emma led them toward the side exit with the practiced ease of someone who had done this before. Many times before, her movements were precise, economical, born from training and terrible experience. "Cover your faces with whatever you have," she instructed, pulling her own shirt up over her nose and mouth. "Stay low if the smoke gets worse, and whatever you do, don't panic." She guided them down the emergency stairwell, her hand trailing along the railing not for support, but as a guide for the others behind her. She knew exactly where they were going. Every turn, every door, every potential hazard. When they encountered a practice fire extinguisher simulation, Emma didn't hesitate. She demonstrated the proper technique with movements so fluid they looked like a dance. Pull the pin, aim at the base, squeeze the handle, sweep side to side. "The pass method," she explained as she worked. "Pin, aim, squeeze, sweep. Always remember that." Sarah Chen watched in amazement. This wasn't someone who had read about fire safety in a manual. This was someone who had lived it, breathed it, made split, second decisions when other people's lives hung in the balance. Fragments of memory flickered through Emma's mind as she led them to safety. A small mountain town, flames racing down the hillside like orange demons, her radio crackling with desperate voices, families trapped in their homes. The weight of command heavy on her shoulders as she coordinated rescue teams and evacuation routes. She remembered the trust in people's eyes as they followed her instructions. The gratitude of parents whose children she had helped save. The respect of seasoned firefighters who looked to her for guidance when everything went wrong. She had been someone then, someone whose opinion mattered, someone whose voice carried weight and authority and the power to save lives. The irony wasn't lost on her. Here she was again, leading people to safety. But this time, they had to overcome their own prejudices before they could accept her help. This time, she had to prove herself all over again. As they reached the basement level, Emma's small group emerged into clean air and safety, while chaos continued above them. The employees who had followed her looked at her with new eyes. No longer the invisible janitor, no longer just another member of the cleaning crew. Jennifer Walsh wiped smoke, induced tears from her eyes, and stared at Emma with something approaching awe. "How did you know? How did you know exactly what to do?" Emma adjusted her uniform, tucking a strand of golden hair back under her cap. For a moment, she looked like she might explain everything. The whole story. How a decorated rescue coordinator had ended up pushing a mop in a corporate tower. Instead, she simply said, "Experience is the best teacher, and sometimes the people you least expect are the ones most prepared to help." The transformation was complete. The simple woman in the janitor's uniform had revealed herself to be exactly what she had always been, a hero, ready to serve, ready to save lives, whether anyone recognized her worth or not. The basement air felt like freedom itself as Emma's group stumbled into the safety zone, their faces flushed and breathless. Above them, the simulated emergency was winding down, but the impact of what had just happened was only beginning to sink in. The building's emergency coordinator, a stern man named Robert Hayes, was waiting with his clipboard and official expression. He had been prepared to debrief a routine drill. Instead, he found himself face to face with something extraordinary. "Ma'am," he said, approaching Emma with obvious confusion, "I understand you led this group to safety using an unauthorized route." Emma straightened, expecting another lecture about protocol, another reminder of her place, but Hayes surprised her. "I've been running emergency drills for 15 years, he continued, his voice softening. "What you did up there, The way you handled that chaos, that was textbook crisis management. Professional level. Sarah Chen stepped forward, still catching her breath. She saved us. When everyone else was panicking, she knew exactly what to do. Jennifer Walsh nodded vigorously. Her earlier skepticism completely evaporated. She wasn't just giving suggestions. She was giving orders. Real orders from someone who knew what she was talking about. Hayes looked at Emma with new respect, taking in her simple uniform, her modest appearance, her quiet demeanor. You mentioned Civil Rescue Command. That's not something you learn from watching YouTube videos. Emma's fingers found the silver badge in her pocket one more time. For a moment, she seemed to consider pulling it out again, claiming her past, demanding the recognition she had earned through years of service and sacrifice. Instead, she tucked it deeper into her pocket and smiled softly. I just did what needed to be done. But why didn't you tell anyone? Sarah pressed. Why let people treat you like you didn't know anything when you obviously know everything? Emma resumed her cleaning, picking up a cloth and beginning to wipe down the nearby surfaces as if nothing extraordinary had happened. As if she hadn't just revealed herself to be one of the most qualified emergency responders in the building. Everyone has a story, she said quietly. I just do my part. The simplicity of her answer somehow made it more profound. Here was a woman who had chosen humility over recognition, service over status, the quiet satisfaction of helping over the loud applause of being celebrated. But Hayes wasn't ready to let it go. Team leader, he said, using the title with genuine respect. We misjudged you completely. The building management, the employees, all of us. We owe you an apology. Emma paused in her cleaning, her golden hair catching the fluorescent light. No apology needed. People see what they expect to see. I'm used to it. The words carried a weight that spoke of deeper wounds, of battles fought and lost, of a past that had somehow led her from commanding respect to seeking invisibility. Jennifer Walsh found herself studying Emma's face, looking for clues to the mystery. There's more to your story. Isn't there something happened that brought you here? Emma's hand stilled on the cloth. For just a moment, her composure cracked. A flash of pain crossed her features, so brief it might have been imagined. She thought of another day, another emergency. Mountain roads slick with rain, and the desperate call that had come in too late. The family she couldn't reach in time. The guilt that had eaten away at her confidence until she could no longer bear the weight of other people's lives in her hands. Sometimes, she said softly, the best thing you can do is step back. Find a different way to help. The group fell silent, sensing the depth of emotion beneath her simple words. They had witnessed her competence, her leadership, her natural ability to take command in a crisis. But they were also seeing her humanity, her choice to heal from whatever had wounded her by serving others in a quieter way. Marcus Henderson appeared at the edge of the group, having finally made his way down through the main exits. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his hair disheveled. He looked embarrassed and confused. I heard what happened, he said, his earlier arrogance completely gone. I heard you led people to safety while the rest of us were stuck in the corridors. Emma continued cleaning, not meeting his eyes. Everyone made it out fine. That's what matters. But I was wrong, Marcus insisted. We all were. We judged you by your uniform instead of your character. That's not who I want to be. Emma looked up then, her hazel eyes soft with understanding. We all make assumptions. The important thing is being willing to learn from them. As the group gradually dispersed, Emma found herself alone in the basement, polishing a glass door that led back to the main building. Her reflection stared back at her, wavering slightly in the imperfect surface. She saw herself as others saw her. Simple uniform, humble appearance, just another member of the invisible workforce that kept the building running. But she also saw what they had missed. The strength in her shoulders, the intelligence in her eyes, the quiet dignity of someone who had chosen service over recognition, someone who understood that heroism didn't need a spotlight to shine. Emma finished polishing the door and gathered her supplies. Tomorrow, she would return to her routine, cleaning offices, emptying trash cans, maintaining the building that housed hundreds of people who barely noticed her existence. But today had changed something, not just for her, but for everyone who had witnessed her transformation. They would remember the janitor who was really a hero, the simple woman who proved that extraordinary abilities could hide behind ordinary appearances. And maybe, just maybe, they would look a little closer at the people around them, listen a little harder to voices they had previously ignored, recognize that everyone has a story worth hearing. Emma smiled to herself as she headed back upstairs. She had found her way to help again, quietly, humbly, in her own way. Sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones who never asked to be called heroes at all. Emma's story reminds us heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they carry brooms. In a world that often overlooks the quiet ones, her courage proves that strength lives in humility. Never underestimate a simple soul. Would you trust someone like Emma if it were you in that hallway? What did you take away from her journey? Drop a comment and let's celebrate the unsung heroes among us. Subscribe for more stories like this, tales where ordinary hearts do extraordinary things. Until next time, remember greatness often wears the simplest face.